about all of that. I'm hoping that fixes all the fucking bullshit.
Surrendered to the castle of Calatrava,
where it was lagging its ass and titties off earlier. I'm gonna wait a second for our favorite resident loser boy to come back, and we'll start the vid. All right, perfect.
unable to quell the overwhelming assault launched upon it by a Crusader force. The vizier of the Almohads was seething. How could that unloyal commander lose Calatrava so easily to the infidels? Aben Kadis had to pay with his life. This act of wrath would prove unwise, for the Al-Andalusian troops allied to the Almohads would not forget the assassination of their commander. The vizier's rash decision would return to haunt the Almohads just when they needed their allies the most, on a scorching July morning at a place called Las Navas de Tolosa. Our kind members and patrons received 15 episodes on in July 11.
Oh, shit. Sorry, mate. That's probably why you missed it. Yeah. No, I did say I was gonna start in 2 hours in general, though. I did give it 2 hours heads up.
The Almohad dynasty had inflicted a decisive defeat on King Alfonso VIII of Castile at the Battle of Alacos.
Teehee.
The consequences of the battle had been momentous and lasting. Following their victory, the Almohads consolidated their hold over southern Spain and forged an alliance with the kingdoms of Leon and Navarra, threatening Castile and Aragon. More
Don't die, you'll
every
be
plan
fine.
to resume the Reconquista or reconquest of Muslim Spain had to be
I don't have any
abandoned.
plans today, so...
King Alfonso himself had barely made it back alive from
I'll
Alacos.
be streaming all morning,
However,
probably.
while the Castilian monarch
Unless I
had been
pass out.
beaten, he was not defeated. Not yet.
I'll probably take a short
the
little
desire
break
for battle
to,
had not been extinguished,
maybe
and
play
those flames
another
would be
game
fanned
that
by Alfonso's firstborn son,
history-based.
the Infante Don Fernando.
Maybe, like... I don't know. Okay, so, like, I restarted Overwatch recently, but roll queue has made the game worse, in my opinion. Like, when I get a support that has 3,000 less healing than every other support in the game, and nothing is going to change it, like, I can't swap to support to fix that person's fucking flaws, right? But in 6v6, no one tries, because apparently that's the non-important game mode. I don't know, dude. I really wanted to like Overwatch again, but Oh, also, all the new heroes are so busted. Holy shit. Like, it's all the new ones that are better than the original ones. The power creep is a real thing with game design. It is, oof. So, and that's also why I quit Marvel Rivals. The very, very rapid power creep in it was insane. Also, because they fucking rigged the goddamn ranking. But I have already ranted to you about that, so I'm not going to go rant to you about that again.
The Infante sent a letter to Pope Innocent III, pleading for his blessing and support in the fight against the Almohads. The Pope was no stranger to inciting large-scale wars against infidels of all persuasions, having called for a crusade against the Albigensians only 1 year earlier. Thus, in December 1210,
Innocent the Third doesn't
seem
seem very innocent. Hey, let me start a crusade every 3 minutes against the infidels. But I innocent the Third.
Bishops in Spain, exhorting them to rally around Don Fernando in his fight against the Muslims. In his missives, Innocent offered a total remission of sins to those Spaniards or foreigners that, out of their own devotion, would faithfully carry out such an endeavor. Papal blessing? Check. Absolution from sin? Check. A call to arms extended to more than one country? Check again. Innocent III had thus called for a crusade against the Almohads. Fernando, his father Alfonso, and the Kingdom of Castile were enthused by this turn of events, the kingdoms of Navarre and Leon less so. These states maintained good relationships with the Almohads and their Al-Andalusian allies, and considered Castile more of a threat than their Muslim neighbours. In January 1211, Innocent sent a follow-up mail blast to the Spanish bishops, asking them to exert all their influence to keep Navarre and Leon at bay, lest they sabotage the crusade. Meanwhile, Alfonso and Fernando were waiting for the right occasion to galvanize their kingdom and initiate hostilities. The opportunity for this presented itself in September of 1211, when the Almohads seized the castle of Salvatierra, previously held by the Knights of the Order of Calatrava. Alfonso convened his war council in Toledo, laying plans for a large-scale expedition to take place in the summer of the following year. The king then sent Gerardo, Bishop of Segovia, to Rome, with the goal of obtaining a new papal bull, calling for all Christians to join the fight. According to Muslim chroniclers, Innocent mobilized an army of friars on a recruiting mission, seeking volunteers from Portugal to Constantinople.
On recruiting mission. I heard an army of friars at first, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know how good that's gonna go. I don't know how good that's gonna go for you and your fucking army. But yeah, no, if it's just to recruit people, that's a whole nother story.
It appears that Alfonso's own recruitment drive in France was more successful. His personal physician, Master Arnaldo, and his jester, Gavendan, successfully recruited the nobility of Poitiers and Gascony. However, Alfonso had lost a precious asset, his son, Fernando. By all accounts, Fernando was a brave fighter and skilled commander. However, after conducting a raiding expedition against the Muslims, the Infante had died of a fever on October 14, 1211, aged only 22. In February 1212, Alfonso received
really
the
is the great equalizer,
alongside reassurances of the Roman Church's support. In April, Innocent
what
secured a truce with Navarre and Leon, protecting Castile's flanks and allowing Alfonso to prepare his forzado, or large-scale campaign into enemy territory. This was not a simple cabalgada or raid. It required a king to muster all available men and resources for a chance at victory. Alfonso's army was organized around a core of professional and semi-professional soldiers, with units of local and foreign volunteers. As was customary, the king would travel with his army, surrounded by an elite guard corps of mounted knights. The monarch could then rely on his Masnada Real, several squadrons of heavy shock cavalry recruited from amongst the ricos hombres, literally rich men, usually meaning the barons and counts of the realm.
Okay, makes sense.
As formidable as they were, these units were not as professional as those provided by the military religious orders, such as the Order of Calatrava, Santiago, the Templars, and the Hospitaliers, all of whom would participate in the crusade. These ranks would be swelled up by the municipal militias, recruited locally, and constituted by peones, meaning infantrymen, and pados, meaning horsemen. The latter had to buy their own horse, which would
really surprised
all of whom
how
would buy the order units were not as
everyone from the fucking churches,
religious orders,
like
such as the
all of them are in chainmail, all of them have like a good helmet, all of them have a horse, all of them have a long lance, all of them have a shield, like well-equipped churchmen.
Trava, Santiago, the Templars, and the Hospitaliers, all of whom would participate in the crusade. These ranks would be swelled up by the municipal militias, recruited locally, and constituted by peones, meaning infantrymen, and pados, meaning horsemen. The latter had to buy their own horse, which would cost as much as 6 oxen or an entire house, which was a hefty price to pay for the benefit of galloping into a rain of Almohad arrows.
Yeah, exactly.
Finally, Alfonso's hosts welcomed large contingents of mercenaries and foreign
You want to spend all that money to run in there?
From modern-day Portugal, Italy...
Yeah, no, I opened up my phone for a sec. Sorry about that. I meant to check on a notification and it opened up into YouTube. But seriously, like, can you believe how much a fucking horse costs, dude? Like, a whole house, basically, you would have to spend just to have it. And then you're doing it to just go, maybe move a little faster, to be the first one into the reign of arm. Yeah, no, I know, it's insane. Like, also, 6 oxen for the price of a horse? Like, shit, dude. Like, that is such a waste, it feels like. You know, it's like, oh, fuck. It almost feels better to, if you're going to war, to just try not to die and save the money so you will have 6 oxen to plow your fields. Like, I don't fucking know, dude. It's like, I really cannot understand the high cost
or an entire house.
Like, even today, horses are fucking expensive. You know, if you fall in love with a horse girl, the joke is that you will always come second in the relationship. Like, financially and emotionally. It's always going to be the horse. The horse is going to fucking cost more than your fucking house. Like, shit, dude. Like, oh, fucking... I don't know why fucking horses are so expensive. Like, I get it, I guess, but, like, I don't.
Hefty price.
We don't need to spend $1.2 million fucking breeding
To pay for the benefit of galloping into a rain of Almohad arrows. Finally, Alfonso's hosts welcomed large contingents of mercenaries.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you fucking save yourself the money and be an infantryman. Like, shit, dude. I'm fucking... You're forcing me to go to war, and I ain't paying for it. Fuck that shit.
And foreign crusaders, hailing from modern-day Portugal, Italy, Germany, and especially southern France. Let us now take a look at Alfonso's adversaries, the Almohad hosts, led by the Caliph Muhammad al-Nasir. The Almohad army was recruited from 4 main national groups: the Almohad tribes themselves, who hailed from North Africa, the Al-Andalusian Muslims residing in southern Spain, Arab fighters recruited amongst the Bau Halal Bedouin tribes, and finally the Oghuz Turks. Each group brought their own specialty tactics to the battlefield. The Almohads generally rallied around the Caliph, protecting him in the rearguard. The Al-Andalusians contributed both heavy cavalry and projectile troops, such as the famed Balearic slingers. Finally, the Oghuz and Arabs formed the bulk of the light cavalry. The former had perfected the art of mounted archery, while the latter fought with spears and swords and were usually the first to attack. Their valor was acknowledged by Caliph al-Nasir, so much so that an Arab's pay was 150% higher than that of an Almohad.
Oh, wow.
The Castilian forces assembled in Toledo
like a really great way to have
1212,
some of your troops get
joined
really
by the
pissed
foreign
off.
crusaders and the allied army of the Kingdom of Aragon. The Christians started their southwards march on June 19, 1212. Meanwhile, al-Nasir too had been rallying his forces in Seville, well aware of Christian preparations. The Muslim hosts left their base on June 22nd and headed towards Jaén. By the 23rd, the Crusader vanguard train reached the castle of Malagon, an important Almohad stronghold. Even without setting up camp, the foreign crusaders in the vanguard seized the side towers of the fortress by storm and proceeded to mine the castle's central fortifications. Malagon fell during the night, and the following morning the garrison was executed.
Hold up. I'm gonna... Oh, that is slightly off size. Okay. There we go.
Just before the arrival of the rearguard under Alfonso VIII. This easy victory did not galvanize the morale of the foreign volunteers. On the contrary, incensed by the lack of booty and the scarcity of foodstuffs, they threatened to mutiny. Only the king's intervention managed to placate the seeds of sedition, sparing the hosts to march on and lay siege to Calatrava on June 27th. The castle of Calatrava had once been the seat of the namesake military order, but had since fallen into Almohad hands. Therefore, its occupation carried great strategic and symbolic significance for both parties. The fortress was a formidable obstacle, protected by 600 meters of walls and the river Guadiana to its north, as well as by a strong garrison under Al-Andalusian commander Aben Cadiz. The King of Aragon, Peter II, led an assault on the northern front on June 29th, supported by the Knights of Calatrava and units of French crusaders. By the 30th, resistance had crumbled. Aben Cadiz agreed to parley, ceding the fortress and its riches in exchange for the life and freedom of his garrison. A great part of the booty was transferred to the foreign crusaders, but this did not placate their mutinous sentiment. Most of them had disagreed with Alfonso's decision to conduct the siege, as their intent was to drive deep into enemy territory. Moreover, the French, German and Italian crusaders were not happy with the leniency displayed towards the Muslims.
Wow!
On July 3rd, the vast majority of the foreign crusaders deserted, leaving behind only the contingents from Narbonne, Vienne and Poitou. The Archbishop of Narbonne described how the deserters returned to their lands without honor nor glory.
Yeah, they threw a big-ass hissy fit.
It seemed that honor and glory were less important to them than loot, for the mutinous crusaders rode up north and tried to sack Toledo. But the Toledan citizens' energetic defense ensured that they returned to their lands without
lost to the...
glory,
Oh, that's
embarrassing.
Cash.
Meanwhile, the news of the fall of Calatrava reached the Muslims in Jaén.
Imagine, you're fucking throwing a hissy fit, and you leave your army. And then you go, or like, you try to take out your frustrations on some fucking civilians, and you take their shit, and then you still get your ass handed to you. What fucking losers! Oh, fucking hell, dude. That's fucking embarrassing.
generating tension amongst their ranks. The Almohad vizier Aben Yama ordered the assassination of the disgraced Aben Kedis.
Oh my
and
god,
later
dude,
addressed
stop having assassinations!
Other Al-Andalusian commanders as such. Leave the Almohad army, for we have no use for you. As God says, if they ride out with you, they shall only cause damage, and they shall sow disorder amongst your ranks.
Wow!
After we are done with this expedition, we will examine the cause of all the wicked. Al-Nasir, on the other hand, was elated at the news that the foreign crusaders had mutinied. Believing that Alfonso was now in a position of weakness, he ordered his armies to march north towards Baeza and beyond, eventually setting camp at Santa Elena. The Christian armies also resumed their descent, easily seizing the castle of Alacos on July 4th and avenging Alfonso's humiliating defeat back in 1195. On the 7th, the Castilian and Aragonese set up camp not far from Salvatierra. Along the way, Alfonso VIII and Peter II received much welcome reinforcements, a Navarrese army led by King Sancho VII the Strong. The conquest of Salvatierra by the Almohads had sparked the entire crusade, but now the three kings decided not to invest time nor resources in a siege, and pressed on instead. On July 11th, the Christians fended off a Muslim ambush on the Fresnedas Heights, and on the 13th they seized the castle of Ferral. On the 14th, the three kings established their encampment on a nearby height, Mesa del Rey, which was immediately attacked by the Almohad cavalry. The Spanish crusaders repulsed the assault, and their war council decided to rest for 2 days. Caliph al-Nasir, encamped nearby with his armies, attempted to provoke the Christians into battle, dispatching more mounted attacks. But the kings did not take the bait, and their knights defeated these assaults in detail. On Sunday, July 15th, the three kings, Alfonso, Peter and...
These guys are probably about to kick these fuckers' asses across the wall and the floor and every, well, pretty much everything that you could find in a room.
Sancho decided they would give battle the following morning and prepared their tactics. During the early hours of Monday the 16th, the Christian army poured into a valley close to the village of Navas de Tolosa. They occupied the western sector of the plain, facing the Almohads and their allies, positioned over gently sloping hills in the eastern half. Alfonso divided his 14,000-strong army into 3 battalions, deployed along a north to south axis and facing the Almohads to the east.
Wow.
The three kings, Alfonso, Peter and Sancho, decided they would give battle the following morning and prepared their tactics. To the village of their allies' 14,000-strong army into 3 battalions. Battalion was already at the right wing with the 8 main blocks.
14 versus 30. Holy shit, dude.
Alfonso divided his 14,000-strong army into 3 battalions, deployed along a north to south axis and facing the Almohads to the east. Each battalion was composed of a vanguard of
I take
slingers,
back what I
archers,
said about the kings gonna kick the Muslims' ass up across the floor. Yeah, we will see, I guess.
Crossbowmen, with 2 squadrons of heavy cavalry at their rear. The left, or northernmost wing, was led by Peter II of Aragon. The centre was firmly held by Don Diego López de Haro, a veteran of Alacos. The right wing was under Sancho VII the Strong of Navarre. Behind these vanguard lines, Alfonso VIII commanded a reserve of heavy cavalry.
Yeah, I really see why they needed those
forces, which
reserves,
numbered 30,000 in total, were also structured into 3 main blocks. The central division was made up of 3 lines of infantry. The first line consisted of heavy infantry armed with long spears to deter cavalry charges. This was followed by 2 lines of light infantry and missile troops, including slingers and archers. Each side of the infantry formation was protected by 2 squadrons of Al-Andalusian heavy cavalry, backed by 2 squadrons of light horse. At the very back of the formation stood Al-Nasir's Red Tent, protected by his elite Black Guard, which were recruited amongst sub-Saharan Africans. The engagement was opened by Don Diego López, who led a series of heavy cavalry charges against the Almohad front line. Don Diego's knights were truly formidable,
all got
especially
stabbed.
those
Well, and the super long spears stabbed all their horses. No, maybe I'm kidding. Who knows?
belonging to the religious military orders. However, they were forced to charge uphill. The Almohad infantry maintained their ranks, breaking their momentum and unhorsing several notable noblemen. The Latin Chronicle of the Kings of Castile describes the carnage as such. They attack, they fight everywhere, hand to hand, with spears, swords and maces. The Christians insist, the Moors resist. The fight goes on, neither one nor the other are defeated. The Almohad infantry repelled several charges, but Don Diego returned each time for more. Eventually, the Christians admitted they could not break the Muslim spear wall.
Yeah, you think you're charging uphill into a giant wall of spears? Like, what'd you fucking think would happen? I'm not, like, I'm sorry. Am I being a dickhead over here, or do I feel like this is really obvious? Like, charging uphill to any enemy army who's just set is just a bad move.
Retreated behind their own infantry.
Fucking hell, dude.
King Alfonso, not realizing this was an orderly retreat, was about to order his reserve to surge forward. This would have probably resulted in a chaotic disaster, but his advisors, the Archbishop of Toledo and Knight Fernando Garcia, managed to placate his bloodlust. However,
Thank
the
God the
Andalusian
fucking
and Almohad
bishop was there.
not so
somehow the fucking priest is better at fucking military affairs than the king. Shit. I don't think these guys have it. I'm worried. That does not make me trust in it at all. I don't know about you, but not me.
And their cavalry squadrons on the wings charged forward in pursuit of Don Diego's knights. The latter had by then reformed behind the screen of missile troops, and thus the incoming charge was met by a deluge of slings, arrows, and bolts. The Muslim cavalry was soundly beaten and rode back towards their lines.
Okay, maybe they have a chance.
As morale plummeted, tensions between the Al-Andalusian and the Almohad Berbers resurfaced. Following the assassination of Aben Khedis, the possibility of an Al-Andalusian mutiny was not a question of if, but a question of when. And it happened at the worst possible moment. The Al-Andalusian heavy cavalry deserted en masse, abandoning the battlefield and leaving Al-Nasir's flanks vulnerable. King Alfonso immediately seized the opportunity.
Shit! Oh my god. I mean, the problem is also once the army sees people retreating, even if you still have the numbers, people are gonna want to start retreating. Maybe we might see a surprising number of the Muslim army defecting here. I don't know.
Ordering his reserves to split in two and bolster the wings under Peter II and Sancho the Strong. The three kings thus led a massive charge against the Almohad line, which soon began to crumble. King Sancho's right wing was the first one to break through the heavy infantry and the remaining light cavalry. Sancho's knights then swung towards the center, heading straight towards Al-Nasir's tent. As the Black Guard formed a square around him and raised their spears, the Caliph remained firm, sitting on a shield whilst holding a copy of the Quran. In previous battles, the Black Guard had been nigh invincible, but on this occasion they were gradually cut down by the charges of the Christian knights. Al-Nasir remained seated until an Arab horseman braved the carnage to shake him and say, "Until when will you remain seated? O Prince of the Believers, God's judgment has been fulfilled.
Yeah, how long are you gonna let your ass get fucking pummeled?"
Perished. The Arab then helped Al-Nasir onto a fast mare, and the two escaped.
Oh my god.
The flight of the Caliph dealt the final blow to Almohad morale, and what remained unaccomplished horseman by the Black City Blacks then won
I want to watch it again.
which soon began to crumble. King Sancho's right wing was the first one to break through the heavy infantry and the remaining light cavalry. Sancho's knights then swung towards the center,
I just cannot believe that the cavalry actually
as the Black Guard
was getting through just a wall of spears uphill. I commend the skill of the cavalry and their ability to wear down the enemy, because holy shit, I'm surprised. Heavy Calv is just bad. Yeah, they're just fucking really well trained here. Like holy shit, they were. Yeah, when they were saying they were elites, they weren't just glazing them, I guess.
Formed a square around him and raised their spears. The Caliph remained firm, sitting on a shield whilst holding a copy of the Quran. In previous battles, the Black Guard had been nigh invincible, but on this occasion they were gradually cut down by the charges of the Christian knights. Al-Nasir remained seated until an Arab horseman braved the carnage to shake him and say, "Until when will you remain seated? O Prince of the Believers, God's judgment has been fulfilled, and his will has been accomplished, and the Muslims have perished." The Arab then helped Al-Nasir onto a fast mare, and the two escaped by a hair's breadth. The flight of the Caliph dealt the final blow to Almohad morale, and what remained of their troops fled in disorder. The Christian cavalry gave chase, overrunning the enemy camp. Some of them indulged in looting, but the majority maintained their discipline and continued the pursuit. In this, they were surely motivated by Jimenez de Rada, the Archbishop of Toledo, who had threatened excommunication for looters. The pursuit continued well into
I'm
the
surprised
evening,
there was
and
any
only at
fucking
9 that
looting
night
when the
did the
fucking
Christian pursuers
Archbishop was
return
here
to
saying,
camp.
"Hey, don't fucking loot."
Spanish chroniclers reported a total of Christian casualties not exceeding 30, which is surely propaganda. A more realistic estimate places
probably
Christian
not a
losses
lot, but
at
still.
2,000, while the Almohads and allies may have suffered up to 20,000 casualties. More importantly, the defeat at Navas de Tolosa would mark the beginning of the end for Almohad dominance in Spain, a slippery slope which propelled the momentum of the Reconquista. In the next episode, we will cover the continuing expansion of the Christian kingdoms, the rise of the new Marinid dynasty in North Africa, and their inevitable clash at the Battle of Rio Salado. To make sure you don't miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member
Yeah, dude, that is a fucking big difference in fucking casualties. I mean, it was well done. I'm, like, honestly surprised. Alright, let's see. What do you got for this next one? Hold on. Give me 2 seconds. I need to find something real quick, and then we'll start the video. 1 second. Sorry about that.
The Crusader victory at the siege of Acre in July 1191 paved the way for their march on the city of Jerusalem.
Yeah, further
While
back
King
in
Richard
history,
the Lionheart planned his next move, the Crusaders rested in the conquered city of Acre, which was divided into military quarters administered by the Knights Templar, Knights Hospitaller, and Knights Teutonic. Meanwhile, on August 20th, the captive Muslim prisoners of the city garrison were all put to the sword on Richard's orders. Eager to follow up the success at Acre with an advance on Jerusalem, the English king led his forces on a long march towards the Holy City in late August, aiming to first capture the important port of Jaffa on the Mediterranean coast. Shadowing Richard's knights was Saladin's Ayyubid army, over 25,000
Yeah, no, that's
strong.
what I meant.
With Acre lost and the Crusaders having established a firm foothold in the middle Levant, Saladin's mission now was to ensure that Richard did not reach Jerusalem, lest the city fall back into Christian hands. The Crusaders' route of march presented Saladin with an opportunity, one he was quick to seize. While the Crusaders marched down the coastal road to Jaffa, Saladin would use his own numerical superiority over the smaller Christian army to ambush them on the plains north of the ruined castle of Arsuf. On the hot, humid afternoon of September 7th,
those numbers
1191,
don't look fair.
the armies under two of the greatest generals of the medieval era, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, would clash at the Battle of Arsuf. Hanging in the balance of this epic of the 1191, the armies under two of the greatest generals of the medieval era, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, would clash at the Battle of Arsuf.
There should probably...
Hanging in the balance of this epic engagement was the fate of the Third Crusade. Pausing for a second, I want to draw your attention and jousters. Acre now firmly under Christian rule, the Crusaders had a base from which to launch operations deeper into the Levant.
That was 2 minutes of ad, Jesus.
King Richard was meticulous in his planning for the summer offensive, plotting out the route the Crusaders would take on their march into Lower Palestine towards Jerusalem. There were two possible routes the Crusaders could use, both of which had advantages and drawbacks. First, there was the inland route, taking the army from Acre to Nazareth and then on to Jerusalem. This would take them on a march through rugged, broken terrain, where the roads ran through several valleys, which Saladin could use as choke points to cut off and ambush the Crusaders. Furthermore, Nazareth was a good 20 miles from Acre, meaning the Crusaders would have to stretch a thin line of communications to link their army back to the supply base at Acre. This would provide Saladin with an opportunity to disrupt Richard's supply lines and defeat his army piecemeal. The second route called for seizing key ports in the Lower Palestine region, namely the city of Jaffa. By using the coastal roads, the terrain would protect the mounted Crusader knights and their long baggage train. After taking Jaffa, the Crusaders would drive on to the much larger port of Ascalon, another 30 miles to the south. Richard could then use these ports as springboards for a subsequent push on Jerusalem itself. The anchorages would also permit direct supply lines for the Crusaders for their eventual siege of Jerusalem. Finally, after much careful deliberation, Richard decided to go with the second route. On August 25th, the Crusaders set out from Acre
do you think
onto
the second route was the better choice, or do you think the first route was? You like the coastal route, or which one are you a fan of? Okay. I think I agree on the second one here. But but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
Sandy plain
If he
of
gets
Haifa,
fucked in the butt, we
bringing
know
for the
who was
campaign
right.
1,200 knights and 10,000 men-at-arms and footmen. The Crusaders brought along their own rations of water and food, as Saladin was likely to poison the wells and conduct a scorched earth policy during the Christian march.
Smart, smart.
To supply the troops on their 130-kilometer trek, a Crusader fleet sailed southward 3 days earlier, keeping pace with the army. This way, Richard could ferry troops and supplies from the fleet to the army along the coastal road. The blistering summer heat during the day meant that the Crusaders had to move during the morning hours and set up camp during the afternoon. All the while, Saladin's army lurked in the shadows of the easterly hills, watching the slow progress of the Crusaders and waiting for the opportune moment to strike.
Oh, they're probably gonna do it like right around here or here.
Saladin would send raiding parties of about 20 to 30 men down the hills to attack the Crusaders at key points on the march, constantly harassing Richard's troops and keeping them on edge. Many stragglers in the rear guard were picked off and cut down, as well as 400 horses, which were irreplaceable on the march. For a brief time, the Crusader rear guard lost contact with the rest of the column, and it might have been entirely cut off and annihilated if only Saladin's son, Melek el-Afdal, had more men at his disposal. By the time Saladin received el-Afdal's message, it was too late, and the Christians in the rear had managed to rejoin the main body. The Crusaders' movement around the spur of Mount Carmel was an arduous affair, slow in nature due to the difficulty of maintaining contact with the naval forces off the coast, coupled with continued harassment by Muslim raiders. Yet Richard continued to maintain his patience, methodically moving his men in the cool early morning and resting them in the hot afternoon. Finally, the Crusader army marched past Haifa, then around Mount Carmel, before halting at an area known as the Casal of the Narrow Ways. From here, the Christians entered unfamiliar territory as they moved into the plain of Sharon, a marshland covered in dense vegetation.
Fake stream bot fuckers.
Muslim scouts continued watching the Crusaders from the hills during their southward movement to Caesarea. Meanwhile, the bulk of Saladin's army encamped at Tel Qayanun. Despite suffering from severe blisters on his lower body, the Sultan endured the pain to move between his scouting posts and the main camp, keeping tabs on Crusader movements. When the Christians reached the outskirts of Caesarea, Saladin opted not to attack, guided by patience and his desire to wait for the best moment to attack.
Whatever.
He was cautious, not wishing to commit his entire army to the field until reinforcements had arrived from his emirs throughout the Sultanate.
That's not a bad idea, I guess.
Saladin remained indecisive for a few days as the Crusaders marched into the empty ghost town that was Caesarea, before moving on to a stream 3 miles south called the River of the Dead.
Oh, well, that's ominous.
Skirmishing grew fiercer after leaving Caesarea, and King Richard moved into the middle guard to oversee the defense of the formation.
Oh, wow.
Richard briefly halted his army to rest for 3 days, beginning on September 3rd. All the while, the Crusader fleet kept the men supplied. Meanwhile, Saladin's army entered the forest of Arsuf, a large woodland stretching 12 miles north of the ruined fortress town of Arsuf. Arsuf had been destroyed by Saladin during his conquests in 1187, and the broken citadel remained standing, serving as a stark reminder of the Sultan's campaign 4 years earlier. While the Crusaders rested in their camp tents, Saladin spent the daylight hours of September 3rd to 4th personally reconnoitering their position, searching for a suitable place to launch a full-scale surprise attack. The forest of Arsuf masked the Ayyubid presence while keeping them at striking distance from the Christian army. It was here, at Arsuf, that Saladin finally sensed the opportunity he had been waiting for. On the morning of September 5th, the Crusaders packed their tents and moved out once
like
more, stopping for the afternoon at Wadi al-Falih, not too far from the ruins of Arsuf. Richard had his men pitch tents in a plain situated between the shoreline and a vast marsh which shielded the camp from a surprise attack.
Okay, well that's good at least. And they can
During the
always retreat back
afternoon,
onto their ships,
Richard sent an
still.
envoy to Saladin's brother, Al-Adil Saif ad-Din, commonly known to the Crusaders as Safaddin, asking to negotiate possible
Safaddin.
peace terms. Saladin, upon
Safaddin.
learning of this, ordered his brother to stall the talks while reinforcements continued pouring into the Muslim camp, hoping to buy time for his army to build up its strength. The next day,
He's like, hey, you want to
Safaddin met
negotiate?
with King
Perfect.
Richard and
Negotiate
his
as long as
envoys.
you want.
During the talks, Richard demanded that the Muslims cede all their conquered lands of Jerusalem back to Guy, which Safaddin was outraged and indignant over. Before anything could be made of the parley, Safaddin broke off the talks against the wishes of his brother. Nevertheless, Saladin
Safaddin,
managed to
you
arrange his
dumbass.
army on the plains south.
You weren't actually agreeing. You were just buying time, you fucking cocksleeve. All you had to do was smile and know in your head that you smiling is gonna kill him. You Safaddin. Saf a fucking bitch of sellsword. Fucking hell, dude. You sure you weren't fucking being paid by Richard? Shit.
Of the forest of Arsuf, the Muslim army totaled 25,000. For several days, King Richard had been anticipating a possible attack by Saladin. Thus, on the march for September 7th, 1191, he rearranged his columns into 5 battle divisions. The Templars under Grand Master Robert de Sable kept up the vanguard, joined by a contingent
holy
of
shit.
Turcopoles, native cavalrymen who were lightly armed, fast-moving, and trained to counter Muslim raiders. Behind a vanguard of Templars and Turcopoles were the Angevins, soldiers from Aquitaine, along with a contingent of Bretons and soldiers from Poitou. These 2 divisions were under the command of King Guy. The 4th division was made up of the English and Normans. Lastly, the Knights Hospitallers and French brought up the rear in the 5th Division, overseen by Hospitaller Grand Master Garnier de Nablus. Richard and the Duke of Burgundy rode along the full length of the march, urging the men to maintain compact ranks. Saladin watched the Crusaders march by, allowing them to move several miles down the road before he unleashed his offensive. Richard's scouts alerted him that Saladin's army was possibly preparing for an assault. Suddenly, Bedouin and Nubian skirmishers emerged and attacked the formation around mid-morning. To the sound of blazing trumpets and beating kettle...
Before the battle goes through, who do you think's gonna win? I think it's probably gonna be the Crusaders again, despite all odds, but I don't know, dude. Yeah, I don't remember hearing Richard getting his ass handed to him like horrifically terribly ever, but maybe I just misremember. I don't know. I'm not as big a history buff as you, so, but we'll see.
Drums, the Muslim army rushed across the plain to engage the Crusaders. The Battle of Arsuf had begun. Crusader knights and infantry braced themselves for the heavy charge. Egyptian cavalry from Safaddin's division swooped down from the north and attacked the French in the rear guard. Al-Afdal's Syrian cavalry simultaneously pounded the French line from the east. The Knights Hospitallers and their infantry support now suddenly found themselves being assailed on 2 sides.
The French always getting pounded.
The press of the Muslim attack soon became unbearable for the Hospitallers and French. Muslim squadrons from the left division simultaneously attacked the Crusaders' middle guard in an effort to pin down the enemy and keep them from reinforcing the French and Hospitallers. Saladin meanwhile moved up his household Mamluk Guard division into position behind Al-Afdal's men. The Mamluk heavy shock cavalry would now be in place to exploit gaps carved through the Crusader line in order to engage Richard's armored knights. Footmen in the Crusader rear guard ferociously fought tooth and nail to hold back the mounted Turkic archers. Crusader crossbowmen shot down many of these light cavalry troops, but they were soon replaced by fresh horse archers so that the French could not withstand the assault. Many of Saladin's horse archers opted to dismount in order to rapidly fire off more arrows from their light bows. As the battle dragged on, the Muslim bowmen succeeded in killing many of the Hospitallers' mounts, greatly frustrating the knights. Master Garnier de Nablu sent word to King Richard that their lines could not be hemmed in any.
I am a weak French twink. Save me, Richard the Lionheart. Ah! Wah wah! Oh, look at me. I'm so skinny, and all I do is drink wine all day and be an asshole. Ah! Please save me, Richard.
Further, he insisted to the king
that was the worst
the
French
Hospitallers should launch a charge to break out of their ensnarement. But Richard would not relent.
I'm sorry, I was eating a Reese's cup.
He was all too aware that if the Hospitaller Knights broke formation, it would spell disaster for the whole army.
Oh, I'm French, and actually, if you come to France and come to Paris, we don't have French food. We just have pizza and burgers and Chinese food. That's not a joke, actually. Like, when I went to Paris, dude, they had more Italian and American food than anything. Yeah. If I go to France ever again, I'm going to the south of France. Apparently, that's where all the good food is. But Louvre and Versailles, beautiful. Definitely would want to visit that again. Sorry, off topic. Let's go back. Oh, why can't I hear anything?
The Crusader line continued inching its way south. Richard sensed the frustration of the Muslim ranks at their inability to break through the Crusader lines. Garnier soon grew angry with Richard's refusal to permit a charge. He shouted over the din of battle to the king, again requesting permission for a charge. Once again,
no, shut
Richard
the fuck up, Frenchie.
Patience. Still highly agitated, he returned to the rear guard to find his Hospitallers under even greater stress than before, and his knights on the verge of mutiny. Why do we not charge them at full gallop? They shouted at Master Garnier, to which he had no response. The Muslims continued pressing the advantage against the rear guard. The Christian foot soldiers grew exhausted from the relentless attacks. Gaps were opening in their ranks as the casualties rose. The mounted Hospitallers behind them were coming under a hail of arrow fire as well. Around this time, Saladin began making his presence felt on the battlefield, and his men fought with even greater ferocity and determination as the Sultan rode back and forth between the lines, shouting words of encouragement. Just as some of the Egyptian cavalry began turning the left flank of the French and Hospitaller line and got into the rear of Richard's army, Crusader infantry rushed up along the shore to block their effort.
Yeah, the Crusaders are
Master Garnier again requested permission to launch a charge from Richard, but once more the English king refused it.
You know, I remember a French person tried to give an argument. Respect the French more. We like to fight for our rights. There was a little bit of attacks, and we revolted. And exactly, you see, the thing is, the French are just a bunch of whiny little assholes. Anything that inconveniences them, they will complain and start a fucking issue about, because they're just entitled fucking shitheads. They go to war at 800 pounds of armor and still fuck up that. Like,
Richard informed the Hospitaller Grand Master that he would signal a concerted charge by all the lines at the right moment, and not before then. Richard sent word to his officers that the signal for an all-out charge would be given by by the blaring of six trumpet
trumpets.
blasts.
Holy shit! What are they trying to do?
If the
Herald
Hospitallers
fucking,
charged out on their own, it would disrupt the line
excuse me.
and cause chaos. Worse,
Ooh,
charging too
that was like
soon
a
would give
weird
the Muslims
burn.
the chance
Burned
to
my
wheel
throat.
about and counterattack. The moment had to be precise, and Richard knew this well. If timed right, the Muslim cavalry would be unable to withstand the charge of the heavy knights mounted atop their armored steeds. As the Battle of Arsuf dragged on throughout the morning, Master Garnier struggled to maintain the cohesion of his impatient Hospitallers. They were angered at the loss of many of their horses and were eager for payback. Then, without orders, two mounted knights broke rank and charged. One was Hospitaller Marshal, the other was Baldwin
I hope they
Lacaron,
get shot
a
in the
knight in
face.
Richard's household retinue who had joined the fight
Wait,
in the
what?
rear guard. It is likely they mistook two blasts from a Muslim trumpet as the signal for the start of the Christian counterattack. This, or they simply charged on their own accord. On seeing his marshal ride out of formation, Master Garnier gave the order for his Hospitaller knights to charge the Muslims, with some of the nearby French knights joining the attack. Upon seeing the Hospitallers break formation, Richard realized it was now or never, and gave the order for the rest of the army
I hope this
to join
works,
the
'cause
attack,
fuck the French.
save for his Anglo-Norman troopers, who remained in place guarding the Crusader standard. Richard and his household cavalry smashed into the Ayyubid ranks with their lances and swords, as Richard personally fought in the midst of the action.
I'm an indestructible armor.
Meanwhile, the Crusader vanguard, led by King Guy, had reached a series of orchards in the northern outskirts of Arsuf.
What
Far
is he
away
doing
from
over
the
there?
combat in the rear, the Templars and the vanguard under Grand Master Robert de Sable stood by, waiting for orders. It seemed to the Muslim leadership as though the Crusaders had launched a well-coordinated attack. Saladin committed his Mamluk household guard, attempting to keep the Crusaders from destroying his now disorganized army. The heavily armored Mamluk cavalry were the only troops in Saladin's army who could stand against the mounted Christian knights,
Yeah,
who
but
were
they already
busy
fucking were
scattering the
dipping,
Muslim
so-
infantry. Richard ordered his knights to halt after they moved close to the wooded hills beyond the coastal plain, fearing that they would overextend themselves, fighting into the ravines and hills ahead, and become ambushed and destroyed. Elsewhere, Saladin gathered his officers and with a small company of bodyguards rode to redeploy on a tall hill near the edge of the forest. His company's drummers beat the signal for his men to rally around,
at least it was
while the
like an
Crusader
organized
knights
retreat.
reformed
They
once
almost- they could've
more
got slaughtered
and charged
there.
with their infantry to clear the battlefield of Muslim stragglers and ensure the defeat of the enemy. The battle was over. It had ended in victory for Richard the Lionheart and his Crusaders.
Richard Lionheart and his deadweight, you mean? Fucking hell.
The Crusader
French.
heavy cavalry charges had successfully
Like, the whole
broken
point
through
was to
the
wait
Muslim
until their
lines.
front line was both disorganized and tired. That way, when you charge, it's like slicing through butter. Like, I guess it was probably better to wait a little bit longer, but I guess it was enough. But fucking the French.
But Saladin was able to reform his
They'll call that courage. I call that being an entitled piece of shit.
army and withdraw to the safety
Oh
of the
no,
forest
we
of
fought
Arsuf.
up for our rights. We were
Richard's
getting
knights
beaten.
and footmen,
We had
exhausted
to.
from the
What did you want
morning-long
us to
battle,
do? Just get our
were
shit
now
done?
free to move on
Yeah,
to
like
Arsuf.
every other soldier getting shit on.
The Battle of Arsuf had proven that Richard could defeat Saladin in a pitched battle. However, the fact that Saladin's army remained intact meant that the Christian victory was not complete. The Crusader cavalry
Yeah, imagine
losses
the French
were
waited
minor,
a little longer.
but the foot infantry had suffered around 700 casualties in the battle. It is estimated that the Muslims lost around 7,000 men during the battle.
That's a
In
lot.
the end, Richard's tactical victory at Arsuf was void of strategic results, as he resumed his march on Jaffa, and Saladin's army limped away from Arsuf, beaten but still intact. The Crusaders proceeded to capture that strategic port city, later in the month.
know
With the
what you
campaigning
expect,
season of
Saladin.
1191 soon coming to a close, however, it seemed as though the drive on Jerusalem would have to wait until the next year. During the fall and winter of 1191 to 92, the opening of possible peace talks or a truce between Richard and Saladin would mark the beginning of the end of the Third Crusade.
What time did you
Nevertheless,
wake up
our
this morning,
Suf
by the
played
way,
a key
Nick Sue?
role in damaging Saladin's reputation gained at Hattin 4 years earlier, and helped
Pause. A roof was an important victory for Richard. Blah blah blah. Saladin's. Oh, it's just basically
cement
what they're
the
saying on
legacy of
screen.
Richard
Okay,
the
whatever.
Lionheart as one of the great generals.
I have time for another video if you got one. By the way, if you have another recommendation, perhaps. What is BTT? What? I'll take that. Oh, bet. You just put it across two things. No, yeah, it took me a second. But you still didn't answer what time you woke up this morning. Or did you wake up yesterday? Because two things might occur. One, I'm probably going to watch this next video and then take a break. I might fall asleep during that break. I don't know. Because I'm going to go eat. I woke up 5 hours ago. So 11. Got it. Which means you'll stay up probably no later than 3. Probably falling asleep around 1, actually. Yeah, human brain can only stay functioning for about 16 hours. Well, functioning well.
It's
Man, you're
early
making the
spring.
videos longer and longer. Goddamn. Is this the Crusade again? Christianity? Yeah. Oh, it's
312
Constantine!
AD, in the far northwest of the Italian peninsula. The Cottian Alps glow in the sunny dawn as the busy town of Segusio comes to life.
Oh my god,
The
312, holy shit, okay.
Those on the walls have no way of knowing that they are about to witness the first step of a military campaign that will change the world.
Wait, have we seen this one before?
An army materializes out of the splendid morning light, coming from the mountain passes west of the town. At its head rides the impressive figure of Flavius Valerius Constantius, known to us as Constantine the Great.
I'll take your word for it, brother.
His arrival will alter history in a manner inconceivable to even the most prominent of astrologists and soothsayers. The sight of his army takes the local militia and the few regulars of the town's garrison by surprise. They are sworn to Emperor Maxentius, one of the 4 tetrarchs. It was thought that Constantine would spend the campaigning season subduing the tribes of the Rhine. Instead, he is here. The lines of Constantine's iron-faced veterans finally form up in front of Segusio. When the order to open the gates is refused, the onslaught begins. Darts and javelins pick off the men on the walls.
I don't know.
Arrows and slingshot put pressure on the towers as the heavy infantry closes in on the walls.
It blends together a
The
little bit.
militiamen
I'm not
are
gonna lie,
stunned
dude.
by the ferociously quick advance. Ladders go up, and before long, Constantine's men push their way over the parapet.
It's like the Avengers movies.
Howls of agony are heard
When you watch a bunch
as the
of them,
legionaries
they all
cut
kinda
their
blend
way
together,
into the
you're like,
town
which movie?
in a machine-like manner.
Sometimes
While the
it's
town's
obvious.
defenders are still in the midst of reorganization, in Turin,
Hold
his
on, wait.
army remained loyal.
Maximus, Lucius, Constantine. Carlos through Italy. No,
The very
we
of
didn't
heaven on
see
the
this,
campaign.
I don't
The
think.
veterans of Severus 6,000 prominent when Constantine was
Okay, no, we
proclaimed
haven't. No,
the
we haven't. We're good.
tetrarchs. The men are stunned by the ferociously quick advance. Ladders go up, and before long,
Actually, let's see what
Constantine's
that
men...
video is. Let's see if it's better or worse than the previous one. We'll stick with the first one. We'll keep this one in our pocket for later, right? When I start back up the stream again later. Sound good?
And push their way over the parapet. Howls of agony are heard as the legionaries cut their way into the town in a machine-like manner.
Yeah, once in the town, you're fucked.
While the town's defenders are still in the midst of reorganization, a specialist detachment has set the town's gates on fire.
Oh, shit.
Seguzio
You're
falls
really
in short
fucked at this
order,
point.
and Constantine's bid for Rome and supremacy has begun.
Nope. Oh.
Constantine's chilling descent from
I
the
thought it was about
Alps
to give
into
us one of
Italy
those ads.
put Maxentius's already strained situation into a full crisis. Originally elevated by the Praetorian Guard and the people of Rome and wider Italy to halt the introduction of imperial taxes and the disbursement of the city's garrison to the war-torn provinces, Maxentius had promoted himself as the champion of the Eternal City and its ancient people. Unlike previous emperors, such as the recently deceased Diocletian, who only stepped foot in the city in the 20th year of his reign, Maxentian would make the greatness of Rome the focus of his rule, and it won him great popularity. With the African provinces of Carthage also coming under his remit and providing grain, he was at first able to discharge large remittances and begin grand building projects in the city once more. When the legitimate rulers of the Tetrarchy system he had upended advanced to bring him to heel,
like, "Hey, bro,
first
we're not so
Flavius
happy with you
Valerius
fucking doing."
Severus, and then later Galerius Flavius Maximinus, Maxentius offered bribes and the promise of his new Italian-centric order, skillfully manipulating their soldiers to desert to his side in droves.
Shit.
This policy, along with the sheer size of the city of Rome itself and the difficulty of investing it, made Maxentius's seizure of power a fait accompli. In the same year that Maxentius appointed himself as ruler of the Italian portions of the empire, Constantine broke with Diocletian's tetrarchic order and was acclaimed Augustus by his soldiers at Eboracum in Roman Britain.
Damn.
Making his way
earlier,
across the
he's
channel
fucking
and into
holy
Gaul,
ballsy.
he established a base at Trier and then engaged the marauding Franks with success in the winter.
Yeah, fuck
Maxentius and Constantine were thus both sons of emperors, and both rebelled after they were passed over for promotion to the Tetrarchy. Maxentius on the retirement of his father Maximian, and Constantine after the death of his father Constantius, while on campaign in Britain. This effectively collapsed the tetrarchic system, and over the course of the next half-decade, there was much fighting and jockeying for position. At one point, the empire had no fewer than 7 rulers, all of them claiming some kind of legitimacy from the original formation instituted by Diocletian. By 312, this had been reduced to 4. Constantine in the west, with Britain, Gaul and Spain pledging loyalty to him. Maximian Daza in the east, controlling Anatolia, Syria and Egypt. Licinius, who controlled the Pannonian, Illyrian and Greek provinces up to the Bosphorus. And Maxentius in Italy and North Africa. But Maxentius was finding that the original premise of his elevation was wearing thin. Not only was Italy and Rome now cut off from the income provided by the provinces, but revolts in Africa also endangered the grain supply, meaning that Maxentius was forced to institute the very taxes and conscription that he had pledged to block at the outset of his coup. The policies worked, and Maxentius was able to retake Africa, securing the grain and also heavily plundering the rebel areas. This action sent a strong message to the other 3 Augusti.
runs a coup
Maxentius had a
based on a
large,
promise,
capable
immediately
army,
breaks
possibly
it.
100,000 strong, and his adroit command structure, logistical capacity, and strategic prowess had been made manifestly evident in the transcontinental operation. Though he had lost the support of his people, his army remained loyal, at least for the time being. Convinced that Constantine was intending to campaign once more against the Franks in 312, he had sent his general, Praetorian prefect Ruricius Pompeianus, to the east approaches to block an expected attack from Licinius.
Yeah,
Pompeianus was likely in Verona when Constantine arrived in Italy and invested Segusio,
we'll see.
and there was another strong Maxentian force at Aquileia. Maxentius was in Rome, apparently due to a portent that the city would fall, and he would die were he to leave it. Nevertheless, his armies in the northeast swiftly set off to interrupt and engage the invading army of Constantine. With the small garrison and local militia of Segusio defeated, and the city in his hands, Constantine went against expectations again, and pardoned the population and their leaders. He ordered his army to put out the fires that had started as a result of their burning the city gates, and the gratitude of the populace was such that the town immediately pledged itself to him.
Yeah, I would too. Like,
This was a notable action by Constantine, as the city had refused to surrender when he initially offered it terms. He was, however, focused on playing the role of liberator and ultimately becoming Augustus of a reunited empire, so his campaign was conducted with a significant amount of restraint. With Segusio thus secure, Constantine's army moved on to Augusta Taurinorum, modern Turin. There, he skillfully enveloped and dispatched another professional Maxentian army.
Modern where?
Chasing them through dispatched modern Turin.
Turin.
There, he skillfully Taurinorum, modern Turin.
Doesn't make a
There,
difference to
he
me.
skillfully enveloped and dispatched another professional Maxentian army. Chasing them through the Po Valley, Constantine outfitted his troops with iron-covered clubs, which proved deadly against Maxentians' armored cavalry.
Damn.
After this action, Constantine occupied Mediolanum without a contest, and from there moved east to besiege Verona. Pompeianus attempted to wear down and stall Constantine's army with another cavalry attack, but this was also broken.
Yeah, no worries, dude.
Constantine fighting in his usual place at the front line, and likely
that's what I'm gonna do after I watch this
envelopment
video. I'm probably gonna go grab something to eat.
And tactics he had at Augusta.
I think I'm gonna make. You know what I like to do? I'll tell you when you're back. Oh, where'd the...
Working on videos is a dream job for me.
Why is the ad in the middle?
Maxentius's forces in northern Italy.
They pranked me.
Pompeianus was inside the city, and for the first time in the campaign, Constantine was facing a commander of elite ability. Both men attempted to force the matter to a head. First, Constantine cut off the city's supplies by investing it from the south and taking the opposite bank of the river Athasis, which surrounded the settlement on the remaining 3 sides. He was unable to force his way through the formidable defenses of Verona, however, and Pompeianus felt assured enough to lead an assault at his main lines. This failed, and Pompeianus next escaped through Constantine's blockade and made his way to Aquileia for reinforcements. Constantine was still incapable of overpowering the veterans inside Verona, and when Pompeianus returned, leading another strong army, Constantine found himself in a similar position to Julius Caesar at Alesia. With no time or means to construct a second line of defense works, as the dictator had in his battle with Vercingetorix, Constantine channeled the spirit of his forebear and led a portion of his force in a final battle, inspiring his men in the front line. Pompeianus likewise
Welcome
seemed
back.
to have fought from the front, leading
You
his
haven't
men
missed a
in
lot.
laying
They,
about the
Pompeianus
besieging force.
basically attempted to do a little fight, attempted to escape, and now they're
But it was
fighting
Constantine's day. Pompeianus had come onto Constantine's forces while the sun was setting, and the fighting lasted until well into the dark. The Maxentian forces only gave way when Pompeianus himself was killed in the thick of the lines.
Oh!
Constantine sent a new call for surrender to the garrison inside
I would
the
surrender
city,
at
which
that
they
point, like,
accepted
shit.
after losing their talismanic leader. Aquileia then seems to have gone over to Constantine's side in the wake of the carnage at Verona, and with his numbers likely raised again by defectors from the remainder of Maxentius's northern forces, Constantine set off on the Via Flamina for Rome. From Ariminum on the east coast, he proceeded to Fanum Fortunae, before making the abrupt turn across the Apennines and threading the Furlow Pass, and moving on to the Schedria.
1 second, I need to stretch out my ears. I might just read the subtitles for a second. Ooh, I've been wearing a headset. I haven't realized I've been wearing a headset for like 6 hours. Ooh.
There does not seem to have been any serious attempt by Maxentius to halt Constantine at these choke points, but it is possible that the forces stationed at Spaletium and Ocriculum gave the advancing army a hard fight to pass through their elevated environs. Both towns feature long slopes that would have made any advancing army an open target while it was proceeding upward, and the exchange of missiles before the inevitable crunch of the infantry battle would have been a searing, torturous crucible. Constantine's army continued toward Rome, but Maxentius's Moorish North African cavalry and lanciari, specialist mounted personnel with the javelin, harassed his columns and flanks. 9 miles from Rome, at Saxa Rubra, the personal forces of Maxentius and Constantine had their first major altercation, when Maxentian units likely used the volcanic rock ridges and bluffs of the area to initiate an ambush on Constantine's vanguard. Little detail is known about this action, except that Maxentius's forces seem to have had significant success, likely lacerating Constantine's vanguard and either forcing their retreat to the main body of the army, or else compelling the main body to come forward and suffer losses in extricating their comrades from the Maxentian attacks. Constantine's host remained mostly intact following the battle, but Maxentius had scored a significant blow. Both sides now regrouped, and the leaders deliberated their next actions. Maxentius had gained his first victory since Constantine arrived in Italy more than 6 months earlier, but the city and its hundreds of thousands of people were still highly restive, and the magnetism and persuasive character that had seen Maxentius through all of the tribulation of the previous 6 years perhaps seemed a spent force. At games held to celebrate the 6th anniversary of his accession, the people cried out to Maxentius that Constantine could not be defeated and that he had to face him.
Wow.
The threat of losing the support of the mob was very real, and there had already been instances of fighting between his praetorians and the citizens. But Maxentius's forces in Rome still remained loyal, and their confidence had undoubtedly been boosted by the events at Saxa Rubra.
I mean, a win definitely helps the
In a grand gesture, perhaps to instill further belief in his ranks, he publicly consulted the ancient Sibylline books, the prophetic volumes sold to the last king of Rome more than 8 centuries earlier. Maxentius announced that the prophecies told him that an enemy of Rome would perish in battle, and he also chose the very day of his accession, the 28th of October, as the date on which he would eradicate Constantine.
Yeah,
As the self-appointed champion of the city, Maxentius said it stood to reason that Constantine was the enemy the Sibyl was referring to in the books. These
you
were
ever considered
auspicious
you were the enemy
tidings,
of
but it was
Rome?
most likely that Maxentius felt that the city would not stand against a prolonged siege, and assassination was too realistic a possibility to remain inside it. Although contemporary sources state that the city was provisioned for an unlimited time, it's almost certain that the African revolt had affected his reserves.
Unlimited
And Constantine's
reserves,
forces
my
were
ass.
unlikely
It
to
doesn't
defect,
matter how fucking...
as Severus's
okay,
and Galerius's legions had when they made their respective attempts to take Rome. Constantine was every bit as circumspect as Maxentius in keeping his army satisfied with their conditions. Throughout his reign, he had endeavored to either keep them on campaign where they would avail of plunder and awards, or made sure that they were paid all salaries and attendant service bonuses. But after the shock of defeat at Saxa Rubra, Constantine needed some further motivation for his legions to overcome their last and greatest hurdle, and it came in the form of divine inspiration. Encamped north of Rome, his biographers Lactantius and Eusebius relate that Constantine underwent a transformative experience in which he, and possibly his men, saw a phenomenon in the sky that formed a solar symbol similar to a Christian cross. Constantine's dreams later that night elaborated on this vision, and when he awoke the next morning, he gave orders for his men to emblazon their shields with the Chi-Rho symbol of Christ. Whether it was a genuine spiritual event for Constantine or an obvious evolution of his existing monotheism with the sun god, the spectacular blessings of heaven on the campaign reinvigorated his ranks and filled them with spirit for the looming collision. Thus it was, with Constantine galvanized by the vision of the Christian God and Maxentius by the ancient prophecies of the Sibyl, the two armies met on a bend in the Tiber, just north of the Milvian Bridge. Maxentius sent his army along the Via Flaminia toward the Tiber River, its waters swollen by autumn rains. Some units crossed the Tiber via the Milvian Bridge, and others employed an improvised pontoon bridge of boats just upstream. Awaiting Constantine, they set up camp on the northern and southern banks of the river, and the North Bank units took control of the southern edge of the plain, now known as the Tor de Quinto. Maxentius had chosen this plain as the site for the coming battle. With their left flank covered by steep bluffs and their rear and right by the meander of the Tiber, there would be no room for either side to conduct complex tactics. This was to nullify the tactical genius of the formidable Constantine, known for his adeptness in envelopment tactics. Constantine's army approached the northern edge of the plain, harassed on its march by Moorish cavalry and mounted lancieri. Constantine's army was a crack force of veterans, consisting of legionary detachments from the Rhine and Britain, as well as guardsmen and cavalry. They had fought multiple campaigns in Britain and the Rhineland under Constantine and his father before him, and their victories in northern Italy had added further to their experience and morale. Constantine had also levied units from defeated barbarian tribes, including Germans and possibly Picts. A panegyric to Constantine notes that his army had fewer than 40,000 men when it first arrived in Italy, from a total of perhaps 160,000 under Constantine's command in Britain, Gaul, Germania, and Iberia. He was limited in this way, as he could only bring so many soldiers without compromising the Rhine and British frontiers. Furthermore, his army had undergone attrition through casualties and a possible need to garrison cities, so it is likely that he had between 30 and 35,000 men by the time he descended onto the Tor de Quinto. Its grasses, oleander and laurel trees, a more vibrant green than usual in the autumn, mixed with the caramel brown of the soil. The Maxentian army included the Praetorian Guard and the Imperial Horse Guard. These units were traditionally based in Rome and had been by Maxentius's side from the beginning. Also present were the thousands of veterans of Severus and Galerius who had defected to Maxentius during their attempts to unseat him, including various legionary units and the elite Moorish cavalry of Severus. In addition, Maxentius had recruited large numbers of Italians, Sicilians, and North Africans as legionaries. Many of the latter units appear to have been untried and under-trained levies. However, the veterans of Severus and Galerius had served in campaigns during the Tetrarchy of Diocletian, and under Maxentius they had seen further action against the African usurpation and Licinius. Saxa Rubra had given a glimmer of hope that Constantine's forces were indeed beatable, but any Maxentian officer who knew their history would have been aware that border legions, used to aggressive offensive action against lethal and numerous enemies, almost invariably bested Italian-based units and the Praetorians, whose duties were almost entirely limited to garrison and public order duties. From its 100,000-strong size at the advent of the campaign, it is likely that Maxentius's army was similar in numbers to that of Constantine prior to the Milvian Bridge. He may have had a modest numerical advantage, enough to justify fighting a battle using less experienced conscripts, but he probably had between 35 and 40,000 troops under his command. Maxentius's army allowed Constantine's men to array themselves in the plain, and both sides prepared for an existential clash. The composition of both armies were also indicative of the changes within the Roman army that had begun under Diocletian and would continue until the collapse of the Western administration in the next century. Most noticeably, cavalry had a far more prominent role and comprised a greater proportion of the total units than in that of the classical legions, with the ally auxiliary units that had long dominated mounted support being sent entirely to the border, and vexellations, regular cavalry that were equal in rank to the legionaries, replacing them. Constantine himself commanded the Clibanarii, super-heavy cavalry that were the embryonic form of the medieval cataphract, and used to tear gaping holes in enemy lines and allow the infantry to take advantage in their wake. Other noticeable differences would have been the mixture of different legionary standards across both sides of the battlefield. In contrast to earlier centuries, most of the new legions formed under Diocletian were smaller than the classical legion, but those that were still in the order of 5,000 to 6,000 men did not campaign with their full complement of legionaries. Instead, perhaps only a third of their members went on campaign, while the remainder attended to garrison duties or operations in another area. At the same time, the non-Roman elements that would, in the coming decades, begin to dominate the legionary ranks were also already becoming significant in Constantine's army. The Alemannic king Crocus had been prominent when Constantine was proclaimed Augustus at Eboracum, and he and his warriors were likely also present at the Milvian Bridge, in addition to other Germans and the Picts.
Okay, they're pretty experienced.
As the two forces faced one another, each seeing the personal standards of their respective emperors for the first time, the meander of the Tiber around both armies ensured that if either side routed, the options for retreat would be limited. Maxentius and the units on the south bank crossed the bridges to join the rest of the army and then destroyed the pontoon bridge. The boats forming the bridge would have foundered and knocked into one another, floating until they came to an uneven stop at another point in the churning river. Only the Milvian Bridge was left standing. Maxentius cut the bridge of boats to encourage a fight-or-die mentality among his soldiers. With limited space available, Constantine likely formed his infantry into a double-line formation, a duplex arches. With even less space to maneuver, Maxentius's infantry appear to have formed an agmen quadratum, a deep rectangular defensive formation that would help them to cope with the attacks of Constantine's veterans. The Italian and African levies likely took up position as reserves in the formation's rear, whereas the Praetorians and legionary veterans formed the front line. The formation was protected on its left by steep hills, and on its right by Maxentius himself, who took up position with part of his cavalry. These horsemen consisted of at least 2 divisions, with Maxentius and the Imperial Horse Guard forming part of a second or reserve division behind the vanguard. To their front were Constantine's best cavalry, led by Constantine himself. Both armies likely also had cavalry on their other flanks and skirmishers to their front. As the 2 armies approached one another, Constantine initiated hostilities, leading his cavalry against the Maxentian right-wing horsemen. Meanwhile, Constantine's generals ordered the infantry to advance against the agmen quadratum. The experienced Constantinian mounted units propelled into the enemy with such ferocity that they quickly overwhelmed the Maxentian mounted vanguard and caused them to rout. Lacking space, the fleeing cavalry charged through their own men, causing disarray among the infantry and the 2nd Division of Cavalry. Not long after, the infantry lines clashed, and a fearsome battle ensued along the front lines. This was the point where the battle would be won or lost. Neither side could afford to retreat. Despite the heat of exertion and armor, the injuries, and the agonizing attacks from the men across from them. In the confined space of the battlefield, veterans on both sides hacked at one another with spear and sword, and hurled their pila to wound or kill. The rear ranks threw lance, a kind of light javelin, and a plume bataille, lead weighted darts, as well as shooting arrows. These plume bataille were tipped with razor barbs on top of a short, hand-length metal shaft, under which was placed a lead weight. At just under half a pound, they could be flung towards the enemy, either embedding themselves into a shield and weighing it down, or else puncturing flesh and embedding to a depth of about 3 inches, scraping and splintering bone. Maxentius's Praetorians fought with special vigor. They were among Maxentius's closest supporters and beneficiaries. They also did not expect to receive mercy from Constantine, being greatly responsible for the usurpation of domains that had been in the possession of his father, Constantius. With the contest still in question, and Maxentius's force holding for the moment, Constantine's cavalry division halted to regroup and recuperate, but Maxentius and his 2nd Division of horsemen soon emerged before the Constantinians and bore down upon them. Maxentius hoped to use fresh troops against an exhausted enemy, but the Constantinians were not so easily overcome. They were a disciplined unit and had defeated the vanguard too quickly to fully exhaust themselves. Moreover, the flight of the vanguard through the ranks of their own comrades had caused a delay while Maxentius formed the counterattack. The horse guard charged, their iron hooves thrumming so loudly over the soft earth that they eclipsed the noise of the still ferocious infantry battle. The moment of contact was colossal, the energy of the lances striking armor reverberating across the plain like a shockwave. For an instant, everything hung in the balance. More and more men of both armies lost sight for all else, except for their own survival and the slaughter of their enemy. But Constantine's cavalry held firm, and a bitter fight took place beside the fast-flowing waters of the Tiber. So long as Maxentius's 2nd Division also held its line, there was stalemate, a grinding attrition that wore away at the ranks like flaking paint. As with the Praetorians, the Imperial Horse Guard had been loyal to Maxentius from the beginning. However, led by their divinely inspired emperor, Constantine's cavalry would not be denied the victory that had been promised, and slowly but surely they gained the upper hand. Finally, perhaps with the fall of a single cavalryman or the turn of a horse, Maxentius's 2nd Division routed, and Maxentius fled with them. His army quickly unraveled. Seeing their right flank exposed, Maxentius's raw levies also fled from the fight, abandoning the veterans to their front. Some of Constantine's cavalry remained on the heels of Maxentius, while others attacked his frontline infantry in the flanks and rear. Blood was in the water, and they could sense the release of victory. Maxentius's veteran infantry was now fighting a losing battle, but the Praetorians in particular refused to flee. As their green legionaries broke and fled, the Praetorians found themselves surrounded on all sides. Behind, the fugitives fled for the Milvian Bridge. It became a bottleneck, and many escaping soldiers tried to wade or swim across. Scores, hundreds, and finally thousands drowned in the churning waters. Other soldiers attempted to crowd onto the narrow Milvian Bridge, pushing one another into the Tiber as they attempted to make it to the other side. With Constantine finally catching up to them, those caught on the north bank of the Tiber were summarily massacred. As for Maxentius, he attempted to ford the Tiber on horseback before being overcome by its strong current and swollen waters. Covered in heavy armor, the Tetrarch drowned in the Tiber's waters, along with many of the other fugitives. Meanwhile, the Praetorians fought on, falling where they stood, until finally Constantine offered them the opportunity to surrender. Perhaps surprised and relieved, the Praetorians accepted the offer. Losses for either army are not well documented, but it is certain that Maxentius's army suffered very high casualties. Constantine had won Rome, the greatest city in the world and the lawful and spiritual home of the empire, until he decided to construct his new capital at Byzantium in the coming decades. By the next day, the Tiber's current had slowed, the river being clogged with corpses. Maxentius's body was held in place by obstructions, perhaps others who had drowned. Recognizable by its distinctive armor, his corpse was fished out of the river and beheaded. Constantine entered the city in triumph, the Cairo of Christ prominently displayed for the first time by any emperor. Next to the cross, Maxentius's head was paraded through the streets on a spear. Constantine once more presented himself as a liberator, and so the city's inhabitants played their part, hurling abuse at Maxentius to please their new imperator. Maxentius's old collaborators, the Senate, declared Constantine Maximus Augustus, and Constantine rededicated Maxentius's construction projects in his own name. In a final move that showed just how thorough his triumph was, Constantine disbanded the Imperial Horse Guards and the Praetorians, redistributing them along the Rhine and Danube frontiers. Destroying their fortified camps and desolating their cemeteries, the emperor built churches in their place. In dissolving the Praetorian Guard, the emperor ended a military unit that had existed since the time of Augustus. Constantine's victory gave him control over the entire Western Empire, and soon afterward, in 313, Constantine's ally Licinius overthrew Maximinus Daza in turn, the two men splitting the empire between them for a decade. Constantine would eventually overthrow Licinius, uniting the empire under his sole rule in 324. Most importantly, Constantine's success at the Milvian Bridge confirmed to him that the God of the Christians had guided his victory. From that moment, Constantine would dedicate himself to actively promoting Christianity, a religion that was still being persecuted in many parts of the empire at the time of the battle. Sponsored by the imperial state apparatus, Christianity took hold with far-reaching consequences for the history of the Mediterranean and eventually the entire world. If you stayed around this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment as a sacrifice to the algorithm. You can also support us on Patreon and get ad-free early access to our videos for as little as $1, or by clicking the thanks button below to leave a one-time tip. As always, we'll see you in the next one.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the best all-in-one visual website builder. During the 4th century CE, the Roman Empire was in a deep crisis. Both politically and militarily, the empire was unstable and had gone through a tumultuous period of barbarian invasions and disastrous civil wars. The tumultuous years after the death of Constantine the Great saw his sons Constans and Constantius II emerge as emperors of the Western and Eastern Roman Empire. But after years of political turmoil, Constantius II remained the sole surviving son of the great emperor, when his brother Constans was overthrown by the commander of an elite unit of his legions, Flavius Magnentius.
There's not a lot to say. I'm just kind of watching it go
Constantius
down.
reacted almost immediately. After concluding a truce with the Persians, he consolidated his forces and marched against the usurper and his brother's
all the way
murderer.
back up.
He eventually faced Magnentius in Pannonia in the disastrous Battle of
Disastrous?
Mursa
Wait,
that
what?
saw massive casualties for both sides, but proved to be a Pyrrhic victory for Constantius.
Shit. Okay then.
After a second and final battle in southern France, the Battle of Mons Seleucus, Magnentius was finally crushed, and Constantius remained the sole and undisputed ruler of the empire. The disastrous civil war that lasted for 3 years stripped the empire.
Oh, hold up. Ah, crap. Didn't mean to click on that. Hold up. I am pretty hungry. I didn't mean for it to keep playing once it finished,
It's early. Did Maxentius's
with Maxentius and Constantine. Just a little bit lacking on the commentary. Yeah, that also happened earlier. God, at one point I forgot to fucking unturn off my headset. But that's another point. Anyway, I'm gonna grab some breakfast. Sorry, I was thinking about something and got lost in my thoughts. That was my fault. But yeah, I gotta do something for a little bit. I might start up again. I might take a nap. Who knows? I'll let you know. All right, Niksu. Hey, catch you laters.